This is Podcast Theory.
Hello again, fellow podcaster, and welcome back to Podcast Theory. I'm your host, Jason Sircone. Today, I want to take a few minutes to talk about something that, man, I've been seeing this a lot lately, and it's pretty much, well, from one ad, but I know there's other talk of this around the internet. And this is a little bit of an extension of the previous episode where I shared my thoughts on properly strategizing your podcast launch so you can overcome that dreaded 3-episode drop off that we're seeing so many podcasters suffer from. So I've been seeing this ad that keeps telling me that starting a podcast is easy. And as I watched the ad all the way through, I was waiting to hear something specific that spoke to that point, but I never did. So let's draw some attention or call some attention to this specific ad, or at least the contents of said ad. And let me break this down because, again, when you listen to the last episode I did where I talked a little bit more in more detail about the 90% 3-episode drop-off epidemic that we're facing in podcasting, and then you hear starting a podcast is easy, you may scratch your head and wonder where the disconnect is, because if it were easy, then we wouldn't have those terrible statistics, right? That's just common sense. But this is where a lot of that disconnection takes place. Starting a podcast is easy, but maintaining and growing and staying consistent with your podcast, that requires work, that requires dedication, and that requires effort. And that's where a lot of people fall off the cliff. So starting a podcast, I know I've talked about this in past podcast episodes and videos, wherever the subject has come up. It's very little to overcome in regards to barriers to entry to start a podcast. I can go back in time to when I started my first podcast. Me and my buddy went on Amazon. We found microphones, we found headphones, we found a cheap mixing board. We started podcasting. And on top of that, of course, we downloaded Audacity to use for very, very light editing. But we also recorded directly to that because we weren't doing video podcasting at that time. We were strictly an audio format. And back in 2015, when I first got started with this, that was pretty much the norm. I'm sure there were some video podcasts, but more or less what you saw or what you got was an audio format. And of course, to this day, we're still doing that, but video has become a major component. But when I think back, when we did very little planning, these are things that I talk to everybody about now. Make sure you strategize. Make sure that you have a strong plan of action as to where you want to go. Think about your short-term and long-term growth and planning overall, because you want to be able to build a foundation and then have your show grow upon that foundation. And if the foundation's strong, the building is going to be easier to construct. And I did not think of those things. Me and my friend did not think of those things. So learn from my mistakes. That's the lesson that I give everybody, is I talk about how these things could have perhaps led to more longevity with our podcast. But who knows? That was 10 years ago. Let's not dwell on the past. But if you want to get started with a podcast, technically, you could pull up your voice note on your phone and record with no microphone, with no equipment, and you could download a Buzz, well, not really download Buzzsprout, but apply for a Buzzsprout account, have your podcast up and running on the same day. Other than waiting for the certain directories like Apple Podcasts and Spotify to approve your RSS feed, you could be up and running within a matter of a day or two. That's all it really takes in regards to starting. So I absolutely agree. That's easy. If you want to take another step further in regards to ease, going on to Amazon, picking up your mics, picking up a mixing board, or just getting something that plugs directly into your USB, also very easy. So getting the ball off the ground, or getting the whole show off the ground, yeah, that's not hard. But this is where I feel many podcasters run into trouble. Once they start, the easy part's done. Now they're into the trenches. Now they're discovering that as you first bring a podcast to life, there's a bit of a learning curve. You have to understand how to properly edit. You have to put together something that people are going to actually want to listen to. So your content has to be engaging. You have to fully understand that it's going to take some time for your audience to grow. And depending on how much you look at advertising and promotion and how much money you have in your budget to invest in those kinds of things, you could see growth at a faster pace. But overall, you still have to establish yourself as a relevant podcaster who has a strong message to bring to his or her audience. And you have to consistently bring that content to your listeners and to your viewers. And it does take a little bit of time to get to a point where people see that you are dead serious about what you're talking about. Your message is making a real impact and changing lives and helping people discover transformations that they've been looking for. That's not easy. So if you see an ad online that talks about podcasting being easy, keep scrolling. That's one of the biggest things that drives me crazy about this space. And again, I go back to the numbers. There's an obvious disconnection there. And I have a horrible feeling that many people see those types of ads and they buy into it immediately, not thinking about all the effort that needs to go into creating something that's truly special that people want to be a part of. Your podcast is an experience, and you want people to get truly invested, much like they would in a television character or a movie character. There are characters that have come to life that have gripped us and given us something to care about over time. Tony Soprano, my favorite show, The Sopranos. Tony Soprano was a big character. And at that time, when that show came out, the anti-hero was becoming the big thing in society. So, of course, we grabbed hold of that character because he was the ultimate anti-hero. You have to start thinking about your podcast on that type of level. What you're bringing to your audience is something that you want them to obviously feel a major impact from. You want them to be moved. You want them to be captivated. You want them to take action and tell others that they need to be listening and or watching your podcast as well. If you don't have that level of investment in what you're producing, then you're going to lose interest and other things are going to take priority. That's just the nature of the beast. So you have to think about these things on the front end and ask yourself questions like, what can I do to deliver a true experience to my listener and to my viewer? Because I want them to get bought into this message. I want them to feel like a transformation is within their grasp if they continue to listen to the message that I'm delivering. And this is how you get people to move through your sales funnel and how you get people to the other side to where they are now not only making purchases from you and becoming more a part of your orbit, but they're now brand advocates. They're sharing your content. They're telling people about your podcast and letting them know why they need to listen as well. And they're buying your product. They're singing your praises. They're doing everything they possibly can to help you grow because you've brought something into their life that makes them feel different. It makes them feel special, and it makes them happy. That's why we make purchases. That's why we decide to make investments in things, because we are in search of happiness. We want to be at a point where we're comfortable or we're meeting or exceeding the goals that we have set for ourselves, whether they be financial or just general life goals. We don't want to live in misery. We want to live from a position of power. And if we find a resource or an influencer or a thought leader or any type of strategist, whatever world we're in, when we find that person that's going to help us get from A to B, we want to wrap our arms around them and give them a big, warm hug and let them know how much they've changed our life. When you get to that point with your podcast, you're going to be in a very special place because not only will the snowball be rolling downhill with recommendations coming left and right for people to tune into your show, which ultimately feeds your growth, but you're going to be in a position where you start to achieve your goals and people start moving through your funnel. There's a lot of value in doing this right, but that will never be discovered if you come into this thinking it's easy because somebody on Instagram or Facebook told you it was easy through some bullshit ad. You have to think about the long-term picture. And not to burst somebody's bubble. Actually, that's exactly what I mean to do. I am bursting that bubble. I am letting you know that starting is absolutely easy. Growing, not that it's hard, but there is some difficulties involved. But the more you get into the process, the more you get invested in the content that you're creating, the better you get at delivering your message, having powerful conversations with your guests, or how you are bringing content to your audience in a solo format. All of these skills are going to grow the more you put the practice swings in. That's going to lead to better content, and that's where your growth is going to come from. That will never be discovered in 3 episodes. 3 episodes is nothing. 3 episodes is just getting the ball rolling. There's other statistics out there for the podcasters that have gotten even further in the process. Some say that there's less than 6% that actually make it to 50 episodes. I can't remember how many actually make it to 100, but a lot of times you hear podcasters that have broke that 100 episode barrier say that's where things really start to take off. And think about this. When you're just getting started with anything in your life, the very beginning stages are usually a little brutal because you have to find your footing. Hell, to speak to footing, even when we were babies and we started pulling ourselves up and trying to take our first steps, we fell down and we failed, but we kept pulling ourselves up because everybody was encouraging us to do so. But we were also wired internally to get up and do this so we could be mobile. And it takes a minute to make that happen, and you're going to struggle along the way. But once you get it, because you keep at it, big things start to happen. Then you can start to run. Then you can start to jump out of airplanes, and you can do all these crazy things in your world. But you never get there if you just stop after the first time things don't go right. So if you're at that point, or you're thinking about podcasting and you're looking at it from that standpoint of someone told me this is easy, I should do this. But then you get a few episodes in and you realize there's work involved and you want to throw in the towel because you're not seeing immediate results. Heed my call today, my friend. Do not fall into that trap. Understand going in that the barriers to entry to starting that podcast super easy. The work is work. And that's where someone like me can come in and help you understand how that work can be done more efficiently. But never think that you're going to get somewhere through a podcast with no effort whatsoever. And don't think the world's going to change just because you produced 1 episode, 2 episodes, 3 episodes, and nothing really happened. That's reality. Nothing really happens at first. You are establishing a foundation on which to build on. Go back and listen to the last episode that I did of Podcast Theory, where I tell you the reasons why you should never be failing at 3 episodes, because there are easy strategies around that horrible number. Today, the lesson is this: starting, easy. Maintaining, growing, that's going to require a strong commitment on your end. And I hope you're here for it, because doing this the right way through podcasting, it's going to change your life. Not just through the content you create, but also through the relationships that you build with your audience and with the people you collaborate with. Stop thinking that it's going to bring millions of dollars into your bank account when you first start, and focus on that powerful message that you want to deliver to the world. Build it around your passions, and it's going to put you in a great spot to experience growth, because you're going to be invested in what you're creating. So that is going to do it for today's installment of Podcast Theory. I hope you had a great time. I know I did. Tune in on Thursday. Tune in to the very next episode, which will go live on Thursday. And I'm going to be talking about some of the downfalls of podcast guesting. And we'll be talking a little bit more on this, because on Let's Blow This Up Live, I'm going to have a special guest in a couple weeks where we talk about different strategies when it comes to guesting. But this is something that plays very much into the overall content creation side of podcasting, and it needs more love and attention. I'm going to start by doing it on the next episode of Podcast Theory. So until that day comes and our paths cross again, this has been Jason Sircone on Podcast Theory. Good talk. I will see you out there.